Wild at heart. Willow and Oz's relationship becomes strained when another werewolf enters the picture.
We open with Buffy running from a vampire to get away from other people before beating him up. But the real damage came from those terrible jokes.
You know very well you eat this late. You're gonna get heartburn. Get it? Heartburn?
She complains out loud about how the vampire didn't appreciate her jokes, which made her seem crazy. And it turns out Spike is listening, and he starts talking out loud about how Buffy should watch her back.
Before being zapped by the army guys, which made me think they might actually do something in this episode.
But they don't. At the Bronze, the gang talks about how college is great, even though Buffy has done nothing but mope about all of it so far. And Willow talks about how going to the Bronze is like a security blanket for her, even though it's been taken over by vampires multiple times, and she herself was attacked by a werewolf there.
Giles unexpectedly shows up.
For no reason other than the writers not understanding how humor works.
And then the girl from before, Veruca, starts singing on stage, and Willow is again put off by how entranced Oz seems.
And Buffy notices that Giles and Xander also seem to focus on her, which I thought was going to go somewhere, but it doesn't.
Seems to be a recurring trend of not just this episode, but this season. The next morning, Willow and Oz wake up together, and Willow is sad that a full moon is coming and Oz will have to isolate himself for 3 days.
He says he can do it himself, which I thought meant he was probably going to escape. In class, Professor Walsh asks Buffy to lead a discussion group because she wrote a good paper. I can accept vampires and werewolves, but my suspension of disbelief only goes so far. I can't believe that Buffy wrote a good paper.
She says if Buffy has any questions, to ask a TA, and I wonder which TA she'll ask. But that doesn't go anywhere either.
Buffy complains to Willow about doing well in class, and Willow complains that Buffy is doing better than her. And again, suspension of disbelief only goes so far.
Willow says she's meeting Oz at a cafe and heads that way, but Oz is already there and sits down with Veruca.
Buffy comes in and sees Angel talking to another girl. Willow comes in and sees Oz talking to another girl, and the music gets all sad.
Whenever that sad piano music starts playing, it just cracks me up, even though it's supposed to be very serious. I hear it in my head, like the other day.
When you saw your girlfriend talking to some other guy?
No, I was going to get some peanut butter, but we were out. And in my head, it was just...
So that's why you ran away to Los Angeles or whatever.
Went by the name Anne.
Willow sits with them and they continue their conversation about music equipment. And when she tries to join in, she ends up looking stupid.
Oz bails.
Even though Willow just got there and she was supposed to meet him there.
And then Veruca bails because it's awkward.
But not before pointing out Willow's questionable fashion sense.
And then Buffy shows up, and Willow laments she doesn't want to be the kind of person who freaks out whenever Oz notices somebody else. So basically, she doesn't want to be Buffy.
Buffy tells her not to worry about it because Oz loves her.
We cut to Oz putting himself in a Tim Burton cage. Seriously, why does it look like that? It looks like it came straight out of The Nightmare Before Christmas with all the weird angles and stuff.
And he easily escapes when he goes into his wolf form. These characters really know how to plan things out really well.
Well, it's transferred directly from the writers.
Professor Walsh leaves her classroom late and gets attacked by Oz outside, and she suddenly runs into another werewolf.
And she hides in the bushes while the two werewolves start to fight.
The next morning, Oz wakes up naked and covered in scratches, and it turns out Veruca is lying next to him, also naked.
And she tells him to chill out and expresses disbelief that he cages himself.
She explains that he will gradually remember what happened, but why would she think he wouldn't already know that if they're both already werewolves?
They go to a laundry room to get some clothes.
Which is fortunately empty.
And Veruca suggests banging right there on the laundry room floor.
They don't know what it's like to be as alive as we are.
Oz says he's only a wolf 3 nights a month, but Veruca says the human side is just a disguise. She keeps trying to seduce him and says they belong together, but Oz says no and leaves.
Elsewhere, Walsh is recounting her experience with Riley, and Buffy overhears, immediately suspecting Oz.
Willow shows up at Oz's place and says she wants to bang, but Oz is uncomfortable, which makes Willow upset and she leaves.
Buffy visits Giles, who is watching TV.
He's watching a very unconvincingly dubbed Jeopardy ripoff on TV.
Could be the British Jeopardy.
I mean, it wasn't British, so...
sorry, that's incorrect.
Dinette set should be mine.
We go to Janet for a new category. Janet?
Oh.
She tells him about the werewolf attack, and he tells her to go talk to Oz about it, which she probably should have done in the first place.
Yeah, I wondered why she physically needed to walk to each location. Did she forget how to use phones?
What are you talking about? They're in the late 90s. They got the electronic mails.
Willow visits Xander to talk about Oz, and she brings up her problems in the most roundabout, childish way ever, which Xander even comments on. And if Xander is the one telling you you're being childish, you know you have problems.
Buffy visits Oz, who is reinforcing his cage and claims to have no knowledge of attacking Professor Walsh or running into the other werewolf.
And we haven't had a montage yet this episode, so they stick one in here, with Veruca performing with her band and Oz moping.
Full music video. Too bad it wasn't very good.
Oz calls Veruca to meet him at his cage, and he tries to persuade her to lock herself in with him.
She says that's dumb, but he ends up pulling her inside, and they immediately start to bang and change into werewolves.
And the next morning, Willow finds them lying naked together in the cage. Oz tells her he had to lock in Veruca before she hurt someone.
But Willow says he should have been direct and not lied to her, despite not being direct with him.
Oz tells her he knows how Willow feels because he remembers her and Xander. But she says this is different, somehow.
And she runs out in a huff.
She wanders out into the road, and Buffy sees that she's about to get hit by a car. But before she can get there, Riley grabs her out of the way. And I noted that the driver honked at her, but did not slow down at all.
He tells Buffy Willow should probably go home, so Buffy takes her home.
She says she's going to try to find Veruca before she causes more problems, and she tells Willow not to hurt herself and to, quote, put the blame where it belongs. When Buffy leaves, Willow thinks about what she said and pulls out her magic gear.
Buffy visits Oz, and they both go out to find Veruca, Oz claiming he can follow her scent, and meanwhile, Willow is performing a spell.
A clearly evil spell, invoking the devil and hell, apparently with the intention of preventing Oz and Veruca from being happy.
Buffy and Oz find Veruca's clothes and realize it's a diversion, and Veruca is actually heading for Willow.
And I wondered how Buffy ended up so far behind Oz when they started running at the same time, and Buffy's a Slayer, but somehow it happened.
And on the way, Buffy runs into one of the army guys, and they have a little fight thing, but end up both just going in different directions.
And I assumed that guy was Kane coming back for more werewolf teeth and just embarrassed to show his face.
Oh man, I totally forgot about that dude.
I also thought that maybe Buffy was going to accidentally grab the wrong gun and kill Oz or something like that.
At the school, Veruca has made it to Willow, who was unable to finish the spell because she loves Oz too much.
She mocks Willow for a while before smacking her.
Oz busts in, threatens Veruca, and they start to fight as they start to change into werewolves.
And Oz manages to bite out Veruca's throat. When he turns to attack Willow, Buffy shows up and shoots him with a tranquilizer dart.
And at no point was any campus security, custodial staff, or students just there late, alerted by any of this.
Later, Buffy talks to Giles and mentions the masked guy, and how they also saw some armed masked guys on Halloween.
She also expresses concern that Willow is acting like her.
Which is the first sign we've gotten this entire show that Buffy might be maturing at least a little bit.
Remains to be seen.
Yeah, she'll probably run away in the next episode.
Meanwhile, Willow visits Oz, who says he's moving. He needs to figure out the line between the person and the wolf.
He says until he figures that out, he wants to be alone. Willow asks if he loves her, and he says yes, kisses her, goes out to his van, and drives away.
Does he live by himself? Does he have parents? Family?
Those are questions that the writers don't want you to ask.
Because he lives in a house, right? Like a full-fledged house?
I have no idea. Wild at heart. Overall,
is this the first Oz-centered episode we've had? Like, not just the fact that he's a werewolf, but Oz is a person?
Probably.
It only took 4 seasons, but now he's gone. Great. I thought Veruca, while as a catalyst to get in between Oz and Willow, was disappointingly one-dimensional, and whose dialogue was just Oz's inner dialogue. She didn't really contribute anything outside of that, and we could see the way Oz was feeling because he was feeling that way. There were too many things in this episode that seemed like they were going to lead to something, but didn't. The first one, to me, was Giles showing up at the Bronze. Is that going to be a new thing, where he keeps trying to meet up with the gang and be more involved? Because that could be interesting, but again, the writers have no idea how to introduce stuff. I think living with Buffy is rubbing off negatively on Willow, because this episode had her starting to turn into Buffy, which even Buffy pointed out is a negative thing. It's too bad she can't do any self-reflection. Willow and Oz are both characters who regularly tell the other characters to be direct and stop being stupid. And I understand they were both distraught, but it was unfortunate that neither of them could do the same thing themselves, and it led to Oz and Veruca banging. So I guess this whole episode was filled with people giving advice that they never take themselves. Actually addressing the army guys was nice, but they still didn't do anything outside of zapping Spike, which again I wish had gone somewhere, and I'm curious to see what happens, and bumping into Buffy, which was an extremely forced way to get her to notice them. So there were 2 people running around campus in the middle of the day with giant rifles. I thought the drama between Willow and Oz was less painful than the typical drama we see between Buffy and whatever.
Between Buffy and herself.
Yeah, but didn't make me like the show anymore. I gave this one a C.
I gave it a C+. I thought this was easily the best episode of the season so far. The relationship conflict actually made sense in this episode. There were reasons for why things happened, unlike the Buffy relationship drama of all those previous episodes. At the same time, though, I didn't find it particularly engaging, partially because Willow acted like a child the entire time, which made it hard to sympathize with her. It really does seem like the writers only know how to write one type of character that way, because she really was acting like Buffy. When, like you said, we've seen Willow act more maturely in previous episodes, that could have made for a more interesting episode here. And Veruca and Oz were handled in a very basic way. Like you said, Veruca was very one-dimensional. I feel like if they had had her have a more legitimate connection to Oz in her human form, that could have been more interesting. And they had the opportunity there because they both perform in bands. It was an easy opportunity to draw connections and have them, have stuff to talk about. And they kind of did it for one scene. But after that, Veruca was just all that same stuff of, just give in to whatever. And they never brought up that scratch that Oz gave Willow on her hand a few episodes ago, so I guess that just didn't count. I didn't love this episode. It's still not up to B range for me, but at least conceptually it made more sense than a lot of the previous episodes. And again, they seem to really want to focus on the relationship troubles, and that was handled better here, I guess.
And then they promptly removed one of those characters from the show.
Yeah, for me, probably the best character in the show other than Giles and Spike, I guess. Yeah, at least Spike is still there. I mean, he was barely in this episode, but I did like that part kind of didn't go the way you would think it would. But again, I'm waiting for something to happen there, so hopefully that will come soon.